Hamilton was born in Cleveland, Ohio, and practiced her craft doing children's theater while she was a Junior League of Cleveland member. Hamilton made her debut as a professional entertainer on December 9, 1929, in a program of heart-rending songs in the Charles S. Brooks Theater at the Cleveland Playhouse. Before she turned to acting exclusively, her parents insisted she attend Wheelock College in Boston, which she did, later becoming a kindergarten teacher. Hamilton made her screen debut in the MGM film Another Language, 1933, starring Helen Hayes and Robert Montgomery. She went on to appear in These Three, 1936, Saratoga, You Only Live Once, When's Your Birthday? Nothing Sacred, All 1937, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, 1938, Mae West's My Little Chickadee, with W. C. Fields, 1940, and The Sin of Harold Diddlebach, with Harold Lloyd, 1947. She strove to work as much as possible to support herself and her son. She never put herself under contract to any one studio and priced her services at $1,000, $21,200 with inflation a week. Hamilton co-starred opposite Buster Keaton and Richard Cromwell in a 1940s spoof of the long-running local melodrama The Drunkard, titled The Villain Still Pursued Her. Later in the decade, she was in a little-known film noir, titled Bungalow 13, 1948, in which she again co-starred opposite Cromwell. Her crisp voice with rapid but clear enunciation was another trademark. She appeared regularly in supporting roles in films until the early 1950s and sporadically thereafter. Opposite Bud Abbott and Lou Costello, she played a heavily made-up witch in Comin' Round the Mountain, where her character and Costello go toe-to-toe with voodoo dolls made of each other. She appeared, uncredited, in Joseph L. Mankiewicz's People Will Talk, 1951, as Sarah Pickett. In 1960, producer-slash-director William Castle cast Hamilton as a housekeeper in his 13 Ghosts horror film, in which 12-year-old lead Charles Herbert's character taunts her about being a witch, including the final scene, in which she is holding a broom in her hand. In 1939, Hamilton played the role of the Wicked Witch of the West, opposite Judy Garland's Dorothy Gale in The Wizard of Oz, creating not only her most famous role, but also one of the screen's most memorable villains. Hamilton was cast after Gail Sondergaard, who was first considered for the role, albeit as a more glamorous witch with a musical scene, declined the role when the decision was made that the witch should appear ugly. On December 23, 1938, Hamilton suffered a second-degree burn on her face and a third-degree burn on her hand during a second take of her fiery exit from Munchkinland, in which the trapdoor's drop was delayed to eliminate the brief glimpse of its scene in the final edit. Hamilton had to recuperate in a hospital and at home for 6 weeks after the accident before returning to the set to complete her work on the film and refused to have anything further to do with fire for the rest of the filming. After she recuperated, she said, "I won't sue, because I know how this business works, and I would never work again. I will return to work on one condition, no more fireworks." Garland visited Hamilton while the latter recuperated at home looking after her son. Studio executives cut some of Hamilton's more frightening scenes, worrying they would frighten children too much. Later in life, she would comment on the role of the witch in a light-hearted fashion. During one interview, she joked, "I was in need of money at the time, I had done about 6 pictures for MGM at the time, and my agent called. I said, yes, and he said, Maggie, they want you to play a part on The Wizard. I said to myself, oh, boy, The Wizard of Oz. That has been my favorite book since I was 4. And I asked him what part, and he said, The Witch, and I said, The Witch, and he said, what else?" Hamilton's stand-in and stunt double for the witch, Betty Danko, also suffered an on-set accident, on February 11, 1939. Danko made the fiery entrance to Munchkinland, not Hamilton. She was severely burned during the Surrender Dorothy skywriting sequence at the Emerald City. Danko sat on a smoking pipe configured to look like the witch's broomstick. The pipe exploded on the third take of the scene. She spent 11 days in the hospital and her legs were permanently scarred. The studio hired a new stunt double, Aline Goodwin, to finish the broomstick riding scene for Danko. When asked about her experiences on the set of The Wizard of Oz, Hamilton said her biggest fear was that her monstrous film role would give children the wrong idea of who she really was. In reality, she cared deeply about children, frequently giving to charitable organizations. She often remarked about children coming up to her and asking her why she had been so mean to Dorothy. She appeared on an episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood in 1975 where she explained to children she was only playing a role and showed how putting on a costume transformed her into the witch. She also made personal appearances, and Hamilton described the children's usual reaction to her portrayal of the witch: almost always they want me to laugh like the witch. And sometimes when I go to schools, if we're in an auditorium, I'll do it. And there's always a funny reaction, like, ye gods, they wish they hadn't asked. They're scared. They're really scared for a second. Even adolescents. I guess for a minute they get the feeling they got when they watched the picture. They like to hear it but they don't like to hear it. And then they go, boo-hoo. The picture made a terrible impression of some kind on them, sometimes a ghastly impression, but most of them got over it, I guess. Because when I talk like the witch, and when I laugh, there is a hesitation and then they clap. They're clapping at hearing the sound again. Hamilton played 2 credited roles in the famous film, Almira Gulch and the Wicked Witch of the West. Hamilton also appears as an unidentified flying witch during the tornado scene, which may have been the Wicked Witch of the West or her sister, the Wicked Witch of the East. If the latter case, this would be Hamilton's 3rd but uncredited role. Only co-star Frank Morgan played more roles, 5, in the film. Hamilton and Morgan never share any scenes in Oz. However, in By Your Leave, 1934, she plays his housekeeper, and in Saratoga, 1937, she has a colloquy with Morgan regarding a cosmetic product he invented, with side glances and eye rolls by Morgan as to its effect on her beauty. Hamilton's line from The Wizard of Oz, "I'll get you, my pretty, and your little dog, too," was ranked 99th in the 2005 American Film Institute survey of the most memorable movie quotes. Her son, interviewed for the 2005 DVD edition of the film, commented that Hamilton enjoyed the line so much, she sometimes used it in her real life. A few months after filming Oz, she appeared in Babes in Arms, 1939, as Jeff Steele's aunt, Martha, a society do-gooder who made it her goal to send the gang of child actors, led by Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland, to a work farm. In 1945, she played the domineering sister of Oz co-star Jack Haley in George White's Scandals, comically trying to prevent him from marrying actress Joan Davis, even going so far as to throw a hatchet at her. Hamilton and Ray Bolger were cast members in the 1966 fantasy film The Daydreamer, a collection of stories by Hans Christian Andersen. A few years later, they were reunited on Broadway for the short-lived musical Come Summer. Hamilton married Paul Boynton Meserve on June 13, 1931, and made her debut on the New York City stage the following year. While her acting career developed, her marriage began to fail. The couple divorced in 1938. They had one son, Hamilton Wadsworth Meserve, whom she raised on her own. Hamilton had 3 grandchildren, Christopher, Scott, and Margaret. She never remarried. Her Gramercy Park neighbor Sybil Damon reported that Hamilton loved children, but they were often afraid to meet her because of her portrayal of the Wicked Witch of the West in The Wizard of Oz. Damon's nephew refused to meet Hamilton, because even though he understood she was an actress, he thought it was still possible she really was like the character in the movie. Hamilton remained a lifelong friend of The Wizard of Oz castmate Ray Bolger, who played the Scarecrow. Hamilton was a regular parishioner of the Presbyterian Church. A Republican, she supported the campaign of Dwight Eisenhower during the 1952 presidential election. Hamilton's early experience as a teacher fueled a lifelong interest in educational issues. She served on the Beverly Hills Board of Education from 1948 to 1951 and was a Sunday school teacher during the 1950s. Hamilton lived in Manhattan for most of her adult life, and summered in a cottage on Cape Island, Southport, Maine. In 1979, she was a guest speaker at a University of Connecticut children's literature class. Hamilton later moved to Millbrook, New York. She was subsequently admitted to a nursing home in Salisbury, Connecticut 6 months before her death, dying of a heart attack on May 16, 1985, at the age of 82. Hamilton's remains were cremated.